Iran State News is reporting Iranian officials now know the exact location of a helicopter that crashed with the country's president, Ibrahim Raisi, on board. Cold temperatures, fog, and nightfall have all made it challenging for search crews who have been at it now for 10 hours. For more now on this development, I'm joined now by CNN senior national security analyst Juliette Kayyem and John Alterman, director of the Center for Strategic and International Studies Middle East program. Good to see both of you. All right, John, you first. I mean, this seems to be a pretty sizable development, but the terrain is still going to be a challenge. What do we know about this area, how mountaineers, medics, search teams will be utilized?
It is pretty remote. It's all the way tucked into the upper left-hand corner of Iran near the Azerbaijan border. There aren't a lot of people. The whole province has about 50,000 people. So there's not a lot of infrastructure. There aren't a lot of people to help out. An advantage for the government is that means there aren't a lot of pesky eyes looking around. If they want to hold news in, they want to control the news, it's much easier in a place like this location than if it happened in a more populated area where it would be much harder to control the news.
And Juliette, our Oren Lieberman reported that the U.S. is monitoring the situation, but has to maintain a distance. What are the risks?
Oh, that we don't want to be any part of this if this was the result of, the wind and the fog and a risky helicopter ride. I mean, in other words, the tensions are so high that we need to de-escalate. There are going to be rumors about how this happened, and the United States cannot be seen as saying the wrong thing at all engaged. I will say, so they're monitoring it. I know the EU and other entities have been helping with surveillance for the Iranians to try to find the helicopter, the news that we just got. And the third, and I think most important thing, at least at this stage, is to remain quiet so that whatever is going to unfold can be de-escalated. It is interesting to me, and I'd be curious, Jonathan, that the Iranians have really sort of leaned forward on the fog and the weather, that there's not a lot of sort of state-sponsored conspiracy theories about what this is, and that strikes me as good for the overall tensions in the area.
And John, I mean, all day, over the last 10 hours or so, Iran's supreme leader has asked the country to pray while also saying there will be no interruption in government business. So speak to the cultural significance of saying those things.
Well, I mean, the reality is that the president of Iran has much less power than the supreme leader. The supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who is 85, really has all the coercive elements of the state under his control. Raisi serves him, as does the foreign minister who's also on the plane, Hossein Amir Abdullahian. What I think is really significant here is that first you have a very unpopular government. The last I heard from a Western ambassador in Iran is maybe 10% of the population supports the government. But with Khamenei 85 and reportedly ailing, Raisi was thought as a potential person who power would go to. So he was not powerful but could inherit power. If he's not able to inherit power, you could see some shifts within the Iranian power structure. You could see people trying to move to seize power. I think I agree with Juliette. You don't want to make it seem like this was a U.S. plot, but I think you also, from a U.S. government perspective, have to be aware that this may be a week, 2 weeks, a month, where things are starting to shift and there are opportunities for things to capitalize on changes in Iran that would lead to greater security in Iran and in the region.
And Juliette, you touched on this, the Iranian government, known for trying to control the messaging. John, I hear you loud and clear when you say, they do have a penchant for kind of secrecy. So I wonder, Juliette, what do you make of how transparent, if we can use that word loosely here, about this incident, the country has been, and will it remain, with this kind of posture of trying to deliver some messaging out front, talking about it could be the weather was bad. How do you see this moving forward?
It's fascinating for the leadership in particular, any Iranian leadership, let alone Middle Eastern, that we're actually following a search and rescue in real time. We are hearing from news sources, state news sources, that there was at least some contact by some survivors. We don't know who they are. There were 2 other helicopters with the one that went down. And so there's at least some knowledge of at least how it went down and how hard. Everyone is going to keep assuming, possibly, at least for the next 12 or 14 hours, that there might be some survivors, and some of them may be the president. If not, then you start a very, very difficult transition. As John was saying, is a very unpopular government that Raisi was under state sanctions, under U.S. sanctions. He's a horrible human being. I mean, people have to remember this was a man who executed thousands of political prisoners, but he was the president. And so that transition is going to unfold very, very quickly. And whether you get someone similar or someone like the previous president, Rouhani, who was more progressive in the scale of things, we don't know.
All right, Julia Kayyem, John Alterman, thanks to both of you. Appreciate it.